Okay, welcome huddlers. Today we're tackling a topic that keeps many CMOs up at night, navigating the relationship with their chief revenue officer. I'm thrilled to welcome Joelle Kaufman, an experienced CMO coach who's guided countless marketing leaders through this complex dynamic. So Joelle, how are you and where are you this fine day?
Well, first off, I'm fantastic. I'm in Burlingame, California, which is just down the street from the San Francisco airport.
I got it. I know there. I've been there.
Sure.
Yes, and many of our community members are not too far from there. So awesome. Well, look, one of the things we like to do at the beginning of all these sessions is sort of make sure that folks get value right away, convince them to stay, or if they need to leave early, we give them three typical mistakes that you see CMOs making when dealing with their sales counterparts.
You got it.
Okay.
Number one is the continuous, we generated enough leads. I don't know why the revenue isn't there,
Okay.
right? That is
We're
friction
letting
point
this
number
happen.
one.
So that's one. We'll unpack that in a second. What's number two?
Okay. Number two is arm wrestling over budget. We need more salespeople. We need more marketing budget.
Okay.
And number three is who gets credit, right?
Yep.
Was that opportunity generated by sales, by marketing, by God themselves?
Yes, indeed. Okay. So let's start with the first one, the leads to revenue being broken and sort of the blame game, if you will. I feel like a lot of folks in our community have moved past that, but
Great.
you're still seeing it, evidently.
Look, I'd love to think that everybody's moving past that. If everyone's moving past that, is anyone counting MQLs anymore?
Well, are you asking me? The
I
answer
don't
is
know. I mean, like,
so
what is
here's the question. I think it's a question. What we've sort of settled on is it's okay to count them, but don't report them. So in other words,
so,
as a notion of you're looking at your funnel and you're saying, okay, we did this lead progress to something, but stopping there is certainly not an acceptable behavior.
I
Is
think
that
that's right. I think that's right. I think that the bonusing or targeting on MQLs is a sign of we're not quite there,
right? If
right? The modern, what I'll call a CMO 3.0, is really focused on, are we generating sales qualified opportunities? And let me pause for a second. This is all B2B, right, Drew?
all B2B,
Okay,
correct?
great. So
Right.
if we're all focused on sales qualified opportunities, and we've agreed that the goal is to generate through whatever ways we can figure out a volume of sales qualified opportunities at a cost that is competitive for us so that they generate the right amount of revenue, then we can all be aligned. But there's a lot of nuance, right? What are we consistent on what constitutes qualified? Is
Right.
every seller using the same rubric?
So, yeah, one of the things we talk a lot about is definitions and clarifying what every single term means and getting agreement and putting it in writing and having sort of service level agreements, if you will, to do that. And, I would have to say that many of the CMOs in our community also have BDRs or SDRs reporting to them to get
Right.
to that SQOs, if you will. So all of that is good. And I would argue that even if we get there, we're still not eliminating the friction, but it's at least it's a point of that you feel like you're on solid footing
I
uh,
agree.
there. Okay, so let's go to the second one now, and let's talk about arm wrestling over budget, because this is interesting. That's not a conversation that's just the CMO and CRO. It involves the CFO. It can involve the CEO or
The
someone else.
board.
So let's talk about, there is a dynamic that says the CEO's job is to allocate resources, that leaders in the organization's job is to fight for resources. How do you sort of reconcile, in your mind, what's the right thing for CMOs to do when it comes to sort of getting the right amount of budget and working with sales in terms of their budget needs?
So I think it starts with the CMO and the CRO really aligning. And back on the definitions, aligning on what are the trends we're seeing? What are the conversion rates? Where are the problems in the pipeline? Is it a quality of opportunity? Is it ICP? Is it sales follow-up? Is it value proposition? Like, we have to be aligned on what hypothesis we are going to execute upon in order to continue to improve and grow. When we do this separately and you have the, okay, we're both going to do a bottoms up, tops down, we inevitably are creating conflict because we are going to come with two spreadsheets that are incompatible. So as someone who's sat in both seats, it was much easier, by the way, to align with myself. Okay, I have the whole thing. But if you're not responsible for the whole thing, then we have to simulate that by getting together, aligning on the goals. And I think CMOs have to realize CROs get fired when they don't make their number. CMOs get fired a lot too, but that's usually not the reason. They get fired for, I don't know, whimsy, if you will. But
Yeah.
CROs definitely get fired if they sign up for a number and they come in short regularly. So the CRO wants as much confidence that the number they are signing up for is the number they can hit. So how do we as CMOs partner with them and ensure we're both confident, we're both on that number? And then we look at all of the inputs, and the inputs ranging from number of reps, because one of the tragedies of the modern era is that we actually do projections by spreadsheet and say, oh, look, if every seller can carry $1 million quota, if I want to grow by 10 million, I'll just add 10 sellers, right? That seems very simple. It works on a spreadsheet. It doesn't work if you don't have your sellers at full or even over capacity and they're all hitting their numbers. So what you have is insufficient sales capacity with over sufficient pipeline. Usually you have insufficient pipeline and you don't have sellers at capacity and you're just making the spreadsheet work. So this is a tense conversation. I think both the CMO and CRO have to come in as if we are members of the same team. And the team doesn't win if we don't win together. And here are the consequences of different scenarios. But if we came together to the CFO and CEO with a plan where we have, if we will, negotiated, great. Now, sometimes we can't. Sometimes there are CROs who do not understand, for example, why on earth would an event cost $50,000 or $100,000? And you can try to explain it, but a lot of events, not dinners, like trade shows or whatever, are surprisingly expensive. I think transparency is a really good antidote. Let's talk through here's the budget, here's what the historical is, here's what's happening, and we'll get to the attribution argument in a moment, and here's the contribution we're seeing to both new logo and expansion, to existing opportunities and new ones. But let's be transparent, and let's be transparent about the productivity of each seller, of each territory, of each segment, and look at it without defense, without ownership of, well, this is mine, this is yours, but rather we have a set of resources we can deploy. Let's figure out what looks like the best deployment.
So I'm curious, and I'm going to throw this out to the audience too, if you have examples, please put it in chat. But in this perfect world, we're talking about a CMO and a CRO saying, hey, there's X million dollars for sales and marketing. Let's just say 25% of desired revenue as a combined number, which seems to be sort of a formula that some PE firms and VC firms adopt. In a perfect world, the CMO and the sales CRO would say, well, we can split that, or knowing that, this is working better than that, we could actually put more money in marketing and have fewer salespeople. I don't know of a scenario where that's ever actually happened, where a CRO said, you know what, we could do with less salespeople because your marketing is so darn effective. We're just going to, the salespeople are just going to deal with the ones that we know have a high probability of closing, and you're just going to keep giving us these high probability. That world doesn't exist as far as I know.
The only time I've been able to do it is when I held both positions.
Right. Which is an argument that therefore this CRO role, being both CMO and, head of marketing and head of sales, I think the title CRO is unfortunate in this scenario
Yeah, it
because,
is.
right, because, and I think it's worth doing a sidebar on that. Why do you believe that title CRO as the person who does both is unfortunate? I mean, because it feels
Oh,
like the CRO often is just a glorified head of sales who now marketing reports to. It's not necessarily a person who understands that. So
yeah, you just answered the question, right? Like CROs are inflated titles for heads of sales. Often they don't have marketing. Often they have customer success because, you want to control renewal, upsell, all things where business is closed. And there's a whole discussion, probably not for this huddle, around that. But the chief, someone said GTM lead, chief growth officer. We have lots of different names for it. I think the big challenge, Drew, is the vast majority of people who came up the marketing career path have never carried a bag, have
right.
never had to manage quota, close business, negotiate, deal with very hostile, which can be procurement or security people. They've never had to do that. On the flip side, the people who come up the sales path have never had to generate demand or create thought leadership or trade off between events and ads. And so there is a lack of experience that unfortunately leads to a lack of empathy and a lack of time, which leads to a lack of curiosity. The good news is we can actually do empathy and curiosity. We just need to prioritize it and ask questions. So the question when I came in from and by the way, my background, I didn't hold a marketing job until I was a head of marketing. I actually had been a sales leader and a product leader. And then I was a head of marketing for roughly 20, I guess it was 20 plus years. So I did carry a bag and it made me a better marketer. So the step one is early in people's career, can we stop tracking them? And can we actually create varied experiences so that this pattern stops? Which also means when we're hiring, we need to hire for people with varied experiences, which may mean they have less direct experience at exactly what we need them to do, but they're bringing a toolkit that is broader, and that will help us. Okay, rant over.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. And just note, just in the column, yes, if you are a CMO and you've had sales experience, you are at a competitive advantage to someone who hasn't. I think that's absolutely true. I've seen that many times. Lisa Cole, 2X. Lisa, I know you have a question. Jump on in.
It wasn't a question. It was just to say that unicorn situation does exist. I was
Okay.
I wasn't able. I was double booked for this meeting, but I joined because I've actually found a CRO that thinks this way, that recognizes marketing as a lever that could improve sales productivity. And so when he was asked if he needed what additional headcount he needed this year, he asked if we could increase the investment in marketing to help improve the collective productivity of his reps. He's awesome, by the way. I'm going to go out on record. You can go check him out. His name's Ryan Henning. He's a real unicorn. And so that conversation did happen. And I think the underlying metric that drove that conversation was an increasing cost to acquire customers. At 2x, at least particularly within this leadership team, we're all held accountable for sustainable growth. And when we think about scaling up the business, it's been very much, well, how much are we spending to acquire a new customer? And then what's the lifetime value of that customer? And what are all the resources we have to layer in, not just to onboard this customer, but to grow it over time? And within that, they had picked up on the fact that the sales velocity as they were moving up market to enterprise accounts, the sales velocity was dramatically, extending. The sales cycle was getting longer. it was taking more people to help salespeople be credible earlier on, to advance deals, and the win rate was declining. And they had tapped out all of their networks, their reach. They were playing this 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon situation where we're like, who knows who? And that's how they were filling their pipeline. And it led to, 50% year-over-year growth for 7 years. But now it's much harder to get in the door. And then as we move up market to enterprise, it's also really hard to be credible with a CMO of an enterprise organization that might be managing 20, 30, $100 million budgets. How do you be credible, and how do you be findable earlier before someone's willing to talk to a sales rep? And so Ryan got it. He's like, I don't need more sales reps. I need us to be credible, and findable when somebody's in pain, and not entirely dependent on my sales reps, cold calling, knocking down doors, trying to doing this the hard way.
It's great.
So it
Okay.
exists.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to get back to Joelle. Joelle, one of the things that Lisa brought up that I think is so interesting is that CRO sort of understood the interplay,
Yeah.
right? And I wonder, in your opinion, so I think salespeople inherently know that working for a company that has awareness is better than working for a company that doesn't. I think they know that because when they make a cold call and somebody hasn't heard of you, they know, oh my God, this is going to be a lot harder than, yet that doesn't seem to filter up into, awareness and understanding and appreciation of the challenge and of our company secondarily equals marketing, right? And it's weird. There seems to be this disconnect. Oh, marketing is the thing that opens the door, that provides the air cover. So, and I find that impossible to sort of understand.
So I think I see the same thing. And by the way, Lisa, I've worked with heads of sales that get it as well. And interestingly, the companies I've had the longest tenure with are because the CRO or the head of sales, whatever their title was, got it, and we were partners. So it does exist. It is something I recommend to heads of marketing to include in their interview process, is to talk with their sales and finance as they're being interviewed about boring. How do you guys approach budgeting? But you're looking for, are we collaborating at the beginning? Are we aligning on goals? Okay, Drew, to your question. When we started out in the internet in 1995, and you and I have enough gray that we were there, we had this magical thing because suddenly, instead of being like 10% of the marketing budget was direct and you could measure it, and 90% was jazz hands, right? Ogilvy on 50% of my marketing works. I just have no idea which 50, right? So now, we can measure everything. We can try to measure the amount of viewership a press release gets or an article gets. We can measure visits to our website. We now can measure intent, which doesn't even happen on our site. We can measure how much people are engaged. Like we can measure, which is going to lead to the attribution question, by the way. And because we can measure it, finance said, great, give me an ROI on everything. Let's take Ogilvy's formula and say, now you know.
Right.
You don't know. You still don't know.
Don't know.
And that is deeply uncomfortable as a CMO to say, because it looks like you're incompetent. Why don't you know, Drew? Other CMOs, Lisa knows. And remember, we talked about fired for whimsy. So you don't know. And the fact that your sellers or your SDRs call and someone says, oh, I've heard of CMO huddles versus CMO bubbles, CMO what? Right? That's, nobody records that. Maybe now it's on Gong or Zoom or whatever else, but nobody's capturing the speed to which your prospect recognizes your name. Right. So we've over rotated because we can measure. And a lot of marketers today know that, look, if I can prove it on demand gen, if I can prove it on the growth numbers and CAC and what have you, my job is secure. And they're not wrong. But if you don't invest in defining the category, and Christopher Lockhurst has a ton of stuff about this, but if you don't invest in defining the category, if you don't capture the 70% of the sales process that happens before they even consider talking to you, you're simply going to grow a lot slower, which is a trailing indicator. So I think our challenge is, how do we, as a community, educate PE, VC, CEOs, all of the CFOs, all of these communities about, we need to be making a steady amount of investment in this thought leadership, branding stuff. And the data's there. Companies with a strong brand have faster sales cycles at premium prices, like everywhere. So we simply need to be making an analytical case to our boards, our VCs, and we need to be on it together as a community, that this is what drives explosive growth.
Okay.
Now, the way I did it, by the way, when I was operational, is and hit your pipeline number.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it, everything's forgiven if you hit your numbers. There are issues with that, of course, as well, because it's not always, I mean, you go into a recession, all the boats sink, and
Right.
things like that happen. And a lot of folks that were hitting their numbers in 2022 and 2023 didn't hit their numbers in 2024. And turnover at both the CRO and CRMO level, unfortunately, was high. But so going back through these first three things, we talked about agreement on language and making sure that we're measuring the right thing. We talked about jointly budgeting and agreeing on what it is that both are going to contribute. On the budgeting thing, an interesting scenario came up recently where the CRO said to the CMO, I know you were contributing 30, and this gets to the attribution thing, 33% of quote pipeline last year. That number really should be 66%. And it was just an arbitrary, and it was a new CRO, and said, no, it should be just 66%. And so the community rallied, helped this individual find a bunch of data and sort of show that that's kind of absurd in this scenario, that just by saying it didn't make it true, and that was an irrational request. But it does show that getting this agreement on attribution, we should talk about that now. From your perspective, what are you seeing when it comes to attribution?
I want to talk about your scenario first.
Yeah, please.
Right? And I'll start with a story. When I was at Bloomreach, we were big on RevOps. I've always been big on RevOps, love RevOps, and RevOps always reported to marketing. And to the individual who said CMO should report to the CEO, yes. I never reported to a CRO unless I was the CRO, because it seems to work better the other way. CMOs who become heads of sales seem to get sales. Sales leaders who become heads of marketing do not seem to get marketing. I don't know why. It just semes to be that way.
It is a truth.
Right.
Period.
Theories. But when I was at Bloomreach and we're measuring, how the prospects are engaging, what have you, we reached 82% of all opportunities were marketing generated or influenced. And you couldn't separate the two, right? Because you really couldn't tell unless you interviewed every prospect, which isn't necessarily a bad idea. But the CEO said, yeah, that seems right. That should be 100%, right? Because there's a question of incentives, right? The probability, let's stop for a second. I'm talking about new customers.
Right.
You do have to separate expansion within existing accounts, which I think marketing can accelerate and influence and help, but obviously cannot be the generator. necessarily because they're talking to sales and customer success, because they're your accounts.
Right.
When we talk about new accounts, this issue of where did the account come from? Where did the prospect come from? So when I'm asked by a CFO, what did that campaign do for this account? And I said, well, the average number of touches that a prospect has with us before they engage is 11. And there's 7 people that are in the buying committee. So if they each have to do 11, I'm up to 77 touches. What do you want me to say here? Like, this is mathematically impossible. And usually that leads to a deeper understanding of what I call the get out of my shorts philosophy. Let's decide on the CAC we all can align to and the target we want. We do the math, we know what the budget we need. Do all those things work? Okay, if I can deliver the sales qualified opportunities that close at the cost we are setting, don't get into my shorts about how I do it. Now, to the marketers, we need to be maniacal about no sacred cows, right? Oh, we did this show last year. Did it perform? Should we do it again? Oh, we're putting this into webinars or content or whatever. Everything needs to be on the table. And we need to be creating a culture of fast failure and fast and quick innovation, because every time you figure out something that works, assume your competitor's watching and they're replicating it, and the period of time it's going to work for is going to go down. You can never stop innovating. So the answer to someone who says, I'd like it to be 66 instead of 33 is what needs to be true to make that happen? What are the new things we should do? What are the things we should stop doing? What are the ways we should allocate resources? How do you partner with me? I would love to be, I was very proud that we were touching 82%. I wanted to get to 100%. And by the way, the other 18% were pre-existing relationships the sellers had with people they had sold to before, right? It was not that they were doing some wonderful prospecting, because let's be clear, prospecting sucks and it's inefficient. So to have high value sellers spending their time smiling, dialing, emailing to hope they get what, 2 connects, 3 connects a day, when they're not cultivating their existing accounts and their existing prospects, their contracts, and moving those forward. Ultimately, every CFO I know understands that and says, yeah, that's stupid.
So there's an underlying assumption here that I'm struggling with, which is that the cause and effect of everything that you do is so clear and measurable on a net new basis. And for example, trade shows are a great example. Trade shows, you would say, well, if we looked at it from a prospecting standpoint, it sucked because we didn't get any new leads. However, 10 existing customers stopped by the booth and hung out with us, and we were able to upsell them. So that doesn't show up for the marketer. So the marketer could say, well, I didn't deliver any net new. Okay, please stop.
I'm going to stop you. All right.
Good.
I'm going to share what I thought was a stroke of brilliance from the team, what we did at Bloom Reach with events. Okay. First off, I almost didn't want lead scanning because you get so much garbage, and then I got to filter through garbage to figure out what to spend time on. And I cannot create more time, although Gen AI is giving that a good run for its money. Okay. What we did is we created a 20 by 20 booth, of which half was a meeting room. In the booth, the back of the booth was a full-size meeting room. And the sales reps couldn't come to the event if they didn't book 3 meetings. And we had every meeting that happened. And every meeting that happened was considered marketing touched, because it happened because we were at the event and because we had the meeting room. Now, if people said, well, I had coffee with this person. Did you have coffee at that event? Yep. Then it goes to the event. And what I did is partnered with this wonderful CRO that got it. And I said, look, I actually need the data. If this doesn't actually advance any opportunities or generate any opportunities, I never want to do it again. So I need the data. This isn't a I'm good, you're bad. We win or we lose. There's no I. So will you partner with me? And even before, like I told him what we were doing with the booth design, he loved it because they always need a meeting room and people don't want to leave the show to go to a meeting room. So they loved this concept. I was okay with investing extra money in the booth, in the footprint to get the meeting room on the floor. And it was quiet because it was an enclosed, like we built the whole booth around it. So there are ways to engineer it so that you can capture more data, but that partnership about capturing the data is crucial, and how you use it. So I didn't come into any exec team and say, DJ sellers suck, and here's the evidence. Right? Like DJ and I, that's what I'm talking about. We were like this. We were a combined force, which meant if we were going to disagree, and we did frequently, we did it in a room alone, and it was like a boxing match. But we got ourselves straightened out. And when we came out, whether it was to exec, the board, or to our teams, there was one message, one approach, because it's B2B. Marketing and sales are, whether or not we're organizationally merged, in the prospect's buyer's mind, it's one thing. They don't care.
We're agreeing on alignment 100%. There's no doubt when this is working, it is a team effort. I love it when marketing and sales present to the board together. They might take turns every quarter, but they're talking about them as the same thing, if you will, because in so many ways they are inseparable. Attribution and sort of this is a marketing source versus a sales source. There's a weird thing there, because we've just agreed that we don't want this separation, that it's company sourced opportunities. Yet marketers need to justify their budget to somebody. So they need to be able to show, ROI, and it's funny, they only need to show it if you're not hitting your numbers. If right. But at some point in time, you have to sort of create this thing. And there's this notion that, as John Miller likes to talk about, the gumball machine, we're going to put $1 in and 3 gumballs are coming out in terms of opportunities.
Right.
Where, in your advice, when things are working at its best, are we sourcing? Are we tracking sourcing? And if so, how are we using that data?
So, I mean, I tend to be on the side of track everything. We have the capacity to analyze that level of data, and we should. Knowing where your customers that converted to buy, what their journey looks like, that's actually invaluable to everybody, right? Because there is a lot of waste, and the more we can be efficient, the better it is. And frankly, it's better for the buyers, because people don't want to be overwhelmed with emails and content and calls if they're not interested in solving that particular problem right now. I've come to the belief, and I hope this isn't a sacred cow, but I've come to the belief that we cannot create urgency. It is impossible for us as CMOs to create urgency for somebody else. We can hunt it. We can create bait that attracts it if the urgency is there. And we must qualify for urgency. So I think that, how do you prove ROI? I'm measuring everything, and I'm looking at how many sales qualified opportunities did we create? How many of them closed at what volume? How many sales qualified opportunities in the existing customer base? How many expansions? And again, because I'm capturing everything using RevOps very much as a source of intelligence rather than a source of recrimination, I'm using it from a place of curiosity, right? Where can we improve? Where can we get better? What is or isn't working? And what are our signs of it? The other thing, and it's like going way back to the beginning, I talk to the buyers. I ask them, why now? How'd you discover us? Right? And by the way, in a world where trust is deteriorating in institutions, they overwhelmingly trust each other. And I find most marketing organizations underinvest in cultivating customer marketing. not customer marketing so that they buy more. That's very nice. And yes, upsells and cross sells are great. But how many of you are celebrating the impact on your buyers' careers that your solution unlocked, where it's about them and about the risk they took and the innovations they created? And when you celebrate someone who's been successful, you build their brand equity, and they are often then a critical person that other people ask, because that's how it really happens. When I have a problem, when I need something, I would call you, Drew, before I'd go look on the internet and say, please tell me who would be. I mean, I had a question about, what are really good AI solutions for demand gen, and I went into a network I'm in and asked them. So that's what I think is, we need to be using it as intelligence, and we need to be willing to make changes. And then we can show the ROI at this high level, not at a campaign level, right? We
Right.
spent X amount on marketing. It generated this many qualified opportunities that closed for this amount of revenue. And that may have taken 9 months to get from first spend to the other. Did I answer
Or
your?
18.
Yeah,
Or
18, I
18.
want to shoot myself, but yes.
And that's, I mean, that's all of this. The challenge with some of this is, so much of this is, is lagging. There's such a gap between the action of the thing that, quote, got it started, and the thing that and when the deal closes and what it took. But I love this notion of qualifying for urgency. And I think there's a real pearl in there that I wonder, and that this is certainly why folks that sell intent data and so forth are doing so well, is that if you could actually figure out what urgency looks like and you can
Yeah.
qualify for it. So I'm wondering if you can be more specific, or you have insights into what that looks like. I mean, in the
Sure.
old days, you would say someone goes to your pricing page and they've watched the demo. That's a sense of, oh, well, they at least think they are interested enough to find out the price and they want to know how it works. But talk a little bit more. What's state of the art when we're talking
So,
about urgency?
so first off, state of the art is, as part of onboarding a new customer, you have a conversation with them. And the conversation is not about why us, where they regurgitate your value proposition to you. By the way, that's what you're going to get 99% of the time. It is, what was happening at your company that made this a priority now? Your sellers don't know because they're terrified to ask, because they don't want to hear that it's not, right? So why now? Now, why do you want to go to your existing customers and ask? Because that's telling you what you can actually start hunting for. Because the why now has nothing to do with coming to your website, right? The why nows are actually usually one of these categories. There's a new boss and you are part of their playbook. So it behooves you, again, to the customer marketing, those that you have made successful and get new jobs, you need to have a set of plays you run when they change jobs, because there's a high probability you're part of their playbook. Easiest win ever. The secondary win is whoever's replacing them is a new boss. You want to make sure they love you too. Real simple.
So
Number
thank you. Hang on a second. So thank you. Let me unpack that a couple of things. Love that insight. Why now? In the context of 2024, most of the CMOs said their biggest problem was that deals weren't progressing. And if they lost to nothing, no decision. So really understanding why those made the decision is really important. The changing jobs, I just want to do a shout out for one of our partners, which is Boomerang, which helps track your champions, which is really hard to do. You think it'd be easy, but champion tracking is an art form in itself. And so, but it is the low hanging fruit, because if they bought you before and you were part of it, they're going to buy you again, assuming you know where they are. So
Yeah, and you should have LinkedIn alerts. In addition to
right.
Boomerang, like, you should know. You are the head of marketing. Who are your buyers? You have them in your CRM, have a LinkedIn alert for when they change jobs. Usually that's something people announce. So, you have it right there in front of you. Repeat buyer ratio. I love that, Alan. Right. if you don't have a high repeat buyer ratio, you actually have a fundamental problem in your product. You may not have product market fit. If you have a high repeat buyer ratio, that is a fabulous way to an efficient. So new boss, and we kind of detoured into new boss, let's just say most of the new bosses you don't know, but new boss from the inside or new boss from the outside. Number two, new owner. So there was a change in our capital structure. I got bought, I got acquired, I got brought into a PE firm. That creates new urgency. Not necessarily the day they got acquired. You have to be a little bit thoughtful, but within the first 30 to 60 days, they're going to make changes. Are you a material part of making that change? Number three, they got spanked. Something happened in the market. They, analysts came out, whatever it is, they look bad compared to somebody they don't want to look bad next to. And suddenly a whole bunch of people inside their company are trying to figure out, how do I stay employed? Because the reason people do nothing is it's safer. It's just safer. I'm not going to get fired for no decision. I get fired for making a decision, for spending money I shouldn't have spent. Or, and with enterprise software, guys, I could buy something and it takes a year plus to deploy and no one's seeing any value. So we need to partner with the product team. We haven't talked about them much, but how do we make it easy for people to get value quick? They need to get value quickly because they need to defend not just the ROI, but the whole deployment. So if it's taking you 18 months to sell and 18 months to deploy, I guarantee you're no longer the CMO of that company by the time anything good happened.
Yeah. I want to sort of switch gears just a little bit, and because we did have a question earlier on, which is, how do you suggest CMOs reframe their role to build more alignment with CROs without losing sight of long-term brand value?
Yeah. So one of the concepts I'm working with a colleague on, we're toying with a book about it, is to stop being the chief marketing officer and be the chief market officer.
Uh-oh. Okay. I've had this debate, and I continue to have this debate. There are a lot of champions for market office. It feels to me a little bit like jazz hands again. Oh, we're going to change the name of the title.
Let me tell you what's different. Okay. So if you're coming into exec meetings and you're talking about programs and calendar and whatever else, you're in the tactics. You're what I call a tactical hero. It may be why you got your job, but you aren't being a strategic leader. You're not bringing, hey, here's what we're seeing. For example, if I do the urgency why now, and I come to the exec team and I say, I'm going to tell you why every one of our buyers bought in the last 3 months and what that means for what we should do for product, for sales, not only for marketing. Like, that's valuable. And by the way, if I can get it, and it's harder to get the ones who bought from my competitors, but I'm going to bring that too. And I'm going to go to trade shows or to industry events to talk to people and bring data back. And I'm going to be the person that's telling you what's coming in the market, right? So if I'm doing that, and I agree, LTV over CAC, I'm bringing, I'm hitting the CAC number, bringing in the sales qualified opportunities, but I'm also making us smarter as a company. So one of the CEOs I worked for, after I worked there for 4.5 years as a CMO, he had a revolving door. Every year it was a new head of marketing. And I said to him, what's up? He says, well, when I hired you, I hired a business partner who used levers in marketing and sales to drive my business. After you, I started hiring people who were marketing experts in something we needed. The problem was they weren't business partners. So you got to make a choice. Are you going to be a business partner, a market officer, not jazz hands, right? Seriously.
So I'm just going to push back on this and say, I totally agree that great CMOs are strategists first, or business people first. Why do we need a new title to do that?
We don't. I'm using it. I'm using it more to say, look, if you are all focused on marketing,
Right.
You're focused downward into your organization and doing those things. If you are focused on market, you are focused outward and bringing what's outward in. If you, I did it as a chief marketing officer. Like, I'm
Right.
sure everybody on this call is like, yeah, I can do that. But sometimes words, we're marketers, people, sometimes words change perspective. And what I'm saying here is I want to change the perspective that as a chief marketing officer, you can no longer be a tactical hero. You must be a strategic leader, which means you're a market officer. There's another question that just came in.
Yeah, we'll get to it. But
Okay.
so I get it. I understand it. I feel like if we were in B2C, there's no way you could be an effective B2C marketer and a package consultant without knowing the customer really well. You just have to. It's part of the job. It's what you do. And we talk a lot about in CMO huddles that if you want to get attention of the board, simply start every sentence that you say, I was talking to a customer the other day, and just watch the eyes turn. All of those are truths that the more you know about your customers, the more conversations that you've had with your customers, the better and more business value you can bring. I think the question on the title to me, because you suddenly have to re-educate everybody anyway. So act the part. Don't worry about the title is my advice. And I know but there are lots of smart people who are saying what you're saying.
I want you, I don't actually care. Like, I care about words, but if you are a chief marketing officer who is outward facing and bringing the market in, perfect.
Great.
However, there is so much to do when you are heading up marketing. It is a massive job, right? Massive in ways that I don't think the other functions are. And I've done the other functions, right? We run the gambit. Sometimes, again, I ran RevOps, sales dev, plus PR, analyst relationships, branding, design. Let me be clear. There is nothing in my background that gives me any right to have an opinion on design, like nothing. But yet it is my remit. It is in my area of responsibility. So this is a massive amount, and it is every pressure on you is to be a tactical hero. Get the thing done, achieve the number. So whatever it takes, whether it is a title or a post-it on your page or a mantra, I don't really care. But if we want to change how CMOs are perceived and valued at the table, they must represent the market.
No argument for me. So, all right. The question, and I think this is a good summary because we're running out of time, but the ultimate goal of this conversation has been creating alignment for the CRO and the CMO. And because it seems that so often there is misalignment, if you will, and often it comes down to how things are measured and what success looks like. And yet at the same time, we said, as long as everybody's hitting their numbers, there won't be a battle. Is there something innovative here in terms of the thinking of other than the fact that we need to work together, we need to agree on the definitions, that will sort of help dissolve the friction that's inherent in these two roles?
Well, I mean, I do think this comes back to the other question. It really is about what incentives and I used OKRs for most of my career, even before like they became a sexy little thing. It was just made sense to me as a way to align and run my organization as well as connect to others. But it really starts with what, and I think I used the word early, what hypothesis are we acting against? So you talked about a case where I want to go from 33% marketing generated to 66. Okay, other than pixie dust, what do we have to believe changes to make that happen? Now, when I talk about incentives, can we please kill the idea that we need sales to originate X% of their pipeline? Like, I get it. You want your sellers to be prospecting. Why make them competitive with your SDRs and marketing? Like,
right.
That just seems stupid. And there's a simple metric to manage it. no opportunity can be closed and then reopened without a 90-day window. Otherwise, it's an attribution to the original source, because we're not going to let cheating, that doesn't help us grow the business. That's
Right.
just working the comp plan. So build a comp plan that's simple enough that people don't spend any time trying to figure out how to cheat. They just play it.
Right.
Isabella, what did you want repeated?
Yeah,
I'm
sorry, I
sorry.
didn't. Thank you, first of all. This is amazing. I didn't understand what you just said.
Okay.
Like, there's a simple, like,
Okay.
about
Yeah. I'll
the
repeat it.
perspective. Yeah.
Okay. In your CRM, you have a choice of tracking lots and lots of things. If you actually want to say, which I don't love, I want my salespeople to spend 20% of their time prospecting, and I think that will lead to 20% of their pipeline. I'm going to propose an alternative way to make salespeople responsible for their pipeline that isn't this. But if you are in a company that does this, what you want to have is in your CRM, you want to track when opportunities are opened and closed. It's healthy to close an opportunity that isn't progressing. You should. But if you close an opportunity that isn't progressing on the 25th of February, and you open one in the same company with the same contacts on the 26th, that wasn't a non-progressing, that was someone trying to shift credit from marketing and SDRs to sales. And I say, F you. And if I were your sales leader, I would slap you upside the head, because that's not the point. So if an opportunity is closed, which is healthy, and then an opportunity is created in the same account with the same people within a period of time, you can say it's 45 days, you can say it's 90. I like 90. If it is created within that window, it is considered attribution to the original source. If it's after 90 days, fine, like whatever. It's probably a new thing. So that's what I'm talking about. But you can fix this another way. So when I led sales, I insisted that every sales AE and every sales manager always knew their pipeline math, that I could ask them in real time, anytime, over Slack, over text, walk over to them. What's your pipeline math? What did that mean? They knew their quota. They knew their personal close rate. They knew what their late stage pipeline looked like and what coverage we needed. And they knew if they were on track, if they were behind, if they were ahead. If they were behind, the next question was, how are you working with marketing and your SDR? What plays are you running to get to where you need to be? That's what I needed. I don't need to determine you will prospect 20%. I need your pipeline math to work. If your pipeline math works, we hit our number, life is good.
So I'm gonna attempt to sort of wrap and summarize, and then give you a chance to talk about how people can engage with you, because we're out of time. It's been a fascinating conversation. I have so many notes that I want to go back through but there are a couple of real highlights that I just want the CMOs listening to be thinking about. One is understanding your customer so well that you know the question, why now? Is a place, so that you can then qualify for urgency, that you understand in your pipeline really what's urgent and what's just noise, right? Signal noise ratio. And so if you are qualifying for urgency, your likelihood of close is that much higher. And if in fact you're not closing, then you know that you're dealing with a lot of folks that aren't urgent. And so there's a bigger problem going on. An obvious thing to check on is compensation and how people are comped, because that drives everything. And so if you if there's not an alignment between sales and marketing on how sales is comped, it's a problem from the get-go. We talked about a lot of different forms of measurement. I still think CAC to LTV makes sense. It's certainly in the PE world, it does make sense, but it's so much harder to actually get at those numbers than people want to admit.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of time to do it, and it takes time to get to that place. So I think there's an simplicity there that I would love to dig in deeper. So Lots and lots of things. So Joelle, this is a fascinating conversation. How do people engage with you?
Sure. So you can reach me at Joelle at GTM Flow, or if you're interested in how to make this shift from tactical hero to strategic leader, I'm actually put a link. I just put the link in the chat. I have a quick shift worksheet. It's free. Yes, you give me your email, but I don't spam. I hate spam. I don't want to bother people. But if you do that, you'll have the opportunity to get that. And I have a number of resources. What I do, guys, is I lead CMOs to rapidly make that shift from being a tactical hero, highly effective, to being a strategic leader. And what happens is their careers accelerate and they have a lot less stress. I'm not going to say none because the CMO job is stressful and it's hard and it's creative and fulfilling and wonderful. And that is, that's all part of the mix. But you can reach me. I'll put my email in here too. But, Drew also knows how to reach me.
Absolutely.
That's the deal.
Joelle, thank you so much. What an amazing conversation. I really appreciate you and your wisdom. And we will be, and that's, just, it's a hard job. But knowing that you can move from tactical hero to strategic leader is sort of fundamental to the conversation and where I think most of our community really wants to move. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the great questions and comments. You guys were really engaged. I'm sorry we ran out of time for you guys to pepper with direct questions, but I do reply to my emails.
All right. Good deal. Thanks, Joelle.